welcome to this episode of Cali and Craig Talk. I'm Callie,
And I'm Craig.
and today we have a super special
We
guest.
do no more cooking this week.
No, it's not Callie and Craig Cook. Take five. We've been stuck on cooking, can't help it. But today we have one of our authors with us, Robin Steven, who writes under the pen name R.D. Stevens. Is here to talk to us. Welcome, Robin.
Thank you very much for having me. It's lovely to get the chance to chat with you both.
Yeah, we're so excited. So I think we're gonna jump right in so you can tell
Mhm.
us, and we really have been so excited. We were so excited to launch this book because you actually launched the idea for us of this middle grade line of books that we're going to be expanding into
Mhm.
because your book was just so great. So tell us and tell listeners a little bit about your book, if you could.
I, I'd be happy to. Yeah. The book is called Ezra and the Great Bin Jah Meen. And as you said, it's a middle grade book, so it's kind of aimed at 8 to 12-year-olds. And it's, first and foremost, it's an adventure. It's a kind of fantasy adventure. It's a portal fantasy. So it involves Ezra, who's an 11-year-old boy who is adopted and neurodiverse. He's the kind of hero, the protagonist of the story. And yeah, it involves him, certain things happening to him at the start, and then he discovers this portal that appears at the bottom of his garden, and he enters into this whole different sort of fantasy world full of kind of magical creatures and all sorts of things. And yeah, it's a real adventure and a journey for him, not only in the kind of physical sense, but also like any good journey. I think it's a kind of a journey for himself as well, and a bit of his own self-understanding and his kind of relationships.
That's awesome. So when did you, so this is interesting to us because this is, like I said, our first middle grade book. So when did you realize, I'm going to back up from your book just a little bit because I'm interested in what made you, like what went into writing this. So when did you first realize that you enjoyed writing?
Um, and I think like when I was a kid, I was always kind of into like the kind of like creative stuff. I always quite
Hmm.
like that kind of thing, and I remember writing kind of little stories about various things. When I
Hmm.
was in what we call primary school here in
Hmm.
England.
Hmm.
Um, and I always kind of enjoyed that kind of thing, but never anything more than just a bit of enjoyment. And
Hmm.
um, I guess like probably like a lot of authors, I was in a couple of very mediocre bands at one stage as I got a bit older into university, and I kind of wrote songs and things and had a
Hmm.
bit of a go at that, and I used to really like that. And then
Hmm.
yeah, it was probably in my kind of early 20s that I really started taking writing a little bit more seriously,
Hmm.
and realized that I kind of really enjoyed the longer form of it, the kind of trying
Yeah.
to I weirdly went I kind of skipped the short story bit and went straight
Hmm.
into the novel bit, which I guess kind of appealed a bit more. And I've only really started writing short stories more recently, which is kind of
Hmm.
the opposite way around. I
Hmm.
know to some other people, but yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess probably my
Mhm.
early 20s is when I really kind of got into it in a bit in earnest, I guess, if you see what.
Yeah. Yeah. And how many books have you written?
Um, how many have I published, or how many have I written?
How many
So
have
it's,
you? Well, let's see how many have you written, and then you can tell me how
um,
many you've published.
well, I've probably like let's start with published because that's easier.
Okay.
I've had three books published
Okay.
with two different small presses,
Hmm.
and obviously the most recent one being with you guys.
Hmm.
And outside of those three, there's probably another two or three that have been anything close enough to what you would call a finished book.
Hmm.
A bunch of other ideas obviously come and go
Hmm.
as well, as I'm sure you're both authors yourselves, so you know kind of how that process
Yeah.
works.
Oh, yeah.
Um, yeah, so maybe another two or three that have, you know,
Exciting.
yeah, but not quite been,
They're like in the works.
it's not quite felt right, or
Hmm.
yeah, or still not. Um, I don't tend to work on one thing consistently all the time,
Ah,
which I think is
okay.
maybe
Mhm.
kind of maybe you can relate to that. I don't know.
Hmm.
Sometimes
Yeah,
something goes on the back burner for a bit until for some
for
reason I
sure.
feel like I'm in the right place to have another go at
Mhm.
it. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Is this your first middle grade one though? Was Ezra and the Great Bin Jah Meen, is this your first one? Middle
Um,
grade?
it's the first one I've ever tried to get published. Yeah,
Okay.
probably my first ever book that I tried to have a go at was a middle grade book, funnily enough. So
Hmm.
it did feel a bit like kind of going back to my first ever attempts.
Hmm.
But it was quite a different kind of story, and that never saw the light of day for good reason, I think. Maybe I'll go back to it one day, but it was definitely a good learning experience. But
Yeah.
yeah, so it's the first time that I really stuck with an idea and really kind of believed in it and sort of went for it.
Oh, that's awesome. Craig, you want to go? You want to ask a question?
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk more about the writing of this book. So why did you want to write this book? What was it about this story that made you be like, this is the one I want to see through?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and part of that is kind of about my personal circumstances, I would have to say. So Ezra is an 11-year-old boy who's the lead character in the book, and he is, as I mentioned before, he's neurodiverse and he's adopted. And
Mhm.
I am an adopter of a neurodiverse child
Mhm.
myself. And one of the reasons why I sort of first started thinking about writing a book with someone like him as the hero is just because my son likes books, he likes being read to, um, and I was really struggling to find any books that dealt with what I felt was adoption in a kind of authentic, um, representation in a way that actually felt sensitively portrayed, that had the child at
Mhm.
the heart of the story, that was kind of
Mhm.
realistic, that wasn't
Mhm.
sort of about orphans from the 1800s
Yeah.
or animals or other stuff. And actually, there's a lot of different ways that adoption gets portrayed in books and literature
Mhm.
and films and TV, and actually a lot of them just aren't, they're just not like real life.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so the representation of kids, kind of modern day kids who are, especially that intersectionality between being adopted and being neurodiverse, which is really
Mhm.
common.
Yeah.
Um, there just aren't very many of them out there,
Yeah.
and so what I found was that my son wasn't seeing himself in the heroes.
Mm.
He was never identifying with that lead character because they were always somebody different, and so
Mm.
that was kind of, I guess, the first kind of motivating factor for me that really maybe made it stick as well, was like I really wanted to try and write something if I felt like I could, at
Mhm.
least try,
For him. Yeah.
to put something out there in the world that I thought not only would be a great story, but would sort of address this gap a little bit where,
Yeah.
there are a lot of kids out there in his kind of situation, and a lot of people who don't really understand his kind of situation very well either, who
Mhm.
aren't involved in the adoption world.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so I felt like it was a good opportunity maybe to just give it a go and try and write something, and yeah,
Yeah.
and I sort of
Yeah.
had a go for a little while and got a bit of content together,
Mhm.
and life gets in the way, doesn't it? And everything else
Yeah.
happens.
Mhm.
Yeah. And
Um,
that
yeah,
kind of leads into the next question, which was how long did it take you to write this book from story idea to to completion?
yeah, and I, if the total time is probably a few years,
2 years.
um,
Yeah.
and that was quite sporadic in that time. And I had the first kind of 10,000 words for ages,
Hmm.
um, and I couldn't quite figure out how to. I'm not like a rigid planner,
I'm not
I like
either.
I like to
Yeah.
have I like to have a bit of an idea and then I kind of
Hmm.
run with it. But
Yes.
I know a lot of people won't even start writing a book until they've got the whole thing mapped out,
Oh
right? And
God.
like
I
I've
couldn't do
Not
admired,
that.
me.
I
yeah,
couldn't
No.
do that. No, no.
I
I'm a
can't.
pantser all the way, Robin. All the
I
way.
just, my mind doesn't work like that, like,
No.
and I kind of sometimes, I kind of wish it did sometimes. I think feel like maybe that
Yeah.
would take a lot of stress out of the process. Um,
Yes.
but yeah, so then I couldn't quite work out how to, um, where to go, how quite to make it work. And then it was actually 2023, and I decided that I was going to have a go at NaNoWriMo, which I'd never tried before.
Hmm.
And I know since then there's been a few issues with,
Yeah, yeah. But this
a
was
lot of
before
stuff.
that. Yes.
Yeah, this
Mhm.
is before that, just to
Yeah.
clarify.
Yes, yes, yes.
um, and I was like, well, I'll just give it a go, because and for whatever reason something clicked and I had an idea and I just ran with it, and I actually managed to get sort of another 20 odd thousand words. It wasn't, I don't think I could ever do 50, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I got a really big chunk of it like done as a first draft anyway. It
Mm-hmm.
was rough and really needed work, but it was actually sort of, yeah, I got a lot of it done at that time, and
Mm-hmm.
it kind of felt weirdly, I don't know if you've had this experience, when you get in the flow with something, it kind of
Mm-hmm.
feels weirdly easy for little periods of time, and
Yes.
it's just
Yes.
Yeah.
keeps coming, and you're kind of
Yeah.
like, oh god, I've got to keep writing
Mm-hmm.
this down, because I
Oh
don't know
yeah.
when it's
Yes.
going to stop coming,
Mm-hmm.
and it really kind of felt like that for a little while,
Mm-hmm.
um and yeah, that kind of was where, when I first started thinking maybe I've got something here, and maybe this
Yeah.
is something to try and send out into the world.
Well, you did a great job with it. But it's
Hmm.
interesting because when you said that about the adoption and like how, the most of the material out there is from like the 1800s, I giggled a little bit because it's true. That's really the only thing that you see. So like you really filled like a necessary gap. And I don't know, you did a really great job of it because it's just, I guess because it's personal to you and it shows in the story and it shows in the writing. Like it's just very well crafted and it's just very well written. So I don't know, I really like this book.
And I
Um,
find that,
yeah,
yeah, I find
yeah.
that with my limited experience with books about adopted characters, the book is about adoption itself.
Hmm.
Whereas this book is not. It's adoption, being adopted is part of Ezra's identity, but it's not his defining trait. His defining trait is his courage, his passion, who he is in the world. Being adopted is just part of who he is. It's not what the story is about, which I found very interesting and very refreshing as well.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad that that's how you
Hmm.
took the book. And I think that I worked for years teaching,
Hmm.
and kids have a really good sense for like a story that is like, it's a message, like,
Hmm.
and as you say, if you really kind of put that sort of like front and center, as
Hmm.
in it's about adoption, then
Hmm.
I think kids are less likely to engage with it, aren't they? I think that's first and
Hmm.
foremost, you have to have a story. It's got to be a
Hmm.
story, and
Hmm.
then the characters in it have to, then it's about trying to fill it with the types of characters that can then help people think about these kind of things, um, as they're enjoying the story. At least
Hmm.
that's the plan,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think it's so cute. And then I have to ask you this. So this one might not be because I mean, like we write the book. So I feel like for me, when I write books, there's little bits of me in all my characters. For you, is there a character in your book that thinks the way that you think? I haven't asked anyone this that's written like a middle grade book yet, so I'm just curious. And like, did you
Yeah,
have to go back to thinking like a child, like put yourself in the mindset of a child when you were writing it?
I think kind of. I think
Hmm.
partly, um, it's told by a narrator, isn't it? The
Hmm.
story.
Yes.
So I was able to achieve a little distance
Hmm.
by using that device. So
Hmm.
rather than it being told from the child's
From you.
perspective,
Yes.
the choice I decided to make was to have, and the narrator is kind of the stories themselves telling the
Hmm.
story. That's the
Hmm.
idea. It's kind of like
Hmm.
the connecting power of stories coming through, and how they're
Hmm.
kind of saying, actually, this is how we work in people's lives,
Hmm.
and so the kind of narrator is taking on that role, I suppose. So I definitely did, as I was saying, I have got young kids, and I have spent a long time
Hmm.
working with kids in
Hmm.
school. So um, you
Wasn't
kind
that
of
hard for
do
you then? So that
well.
wasn't that hard for you
Yeah,
to go back and think about it because you're used to dealing with them? Well, not
yeah,
dealing with
maybe a
them, but
little
being
bit. Like
around them. Yeah.
maybe it was fresher in my mind, or maybe I
Hmm.
just had more exposure
Yeah.
to hearing kids talk, and
Hmm.
being who they are, and
Yeah.
um, but at the same time, I think, as you say, like that, there's always a part of yourself in every
Hmm.
story, isn't there? And
Hmm.
I tried to write the experience as authentically as I could to the child who was adopted, but again, I am still viewing it through my own
Yeah.
experience of it. I myself am not adopted, so
Hmm.
it was kind of that level.
Hmm.
I've had friends who've read the story and they're like, is the dad you? Because
Yeah,
there is a
yeah,
dad in the story,
right, right.
and you know, and you know, the honest answer is that, a bit like you said, Callie, that there's parts of me and the dad,
Hmm.
there's parts of me and the mum, there's parts of me and Ezra,
Yeah.
and you know, it's kind of a bit of everything really.
Hmm.
But yeah, that yeah, I guess the
Yeah.
parents do think a little bit, probably like I
Yeah.
have tried to think at various times.
Who thinks as a parent? Do you know how it's so hard being a parent sometimes?
Yeah,
It's, it's so hard, just constantly thinking on your feet and constantly, we want to encourage our kids and give them the right information. And then there's times where you're just like totally stressed out, but you can't really show it to the kids. It's very difficult being a parent and balancing everything.
yeah,
So yeah, but with the characters having a little bit of us in them, I find that that's why I take things very personally. So I think it's very, it's always interesting when readers, and this is diverting a little bit, but it's always interesting when readers say, authors shouldn't take reviews personally. But I find that very difficult myself because, of course, I can expect that people won't all like my books because they're not for everyone. But they're all like little pieces of me and my imagination in them. So, like, it's only natural to take it, a little bit like a different, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I think
I
you
don't
know,
know.
you're creating something to put it
Hmm.
out there in the world to kind
Yeah,
of represent a little piece of your way of seeing things, aren't you? You
yeah,
know, that's
yeah.
kind of what this is. It's like a little
Hmm.
window into, excuse me, some aspect of how you think about things and see the
Hmm.
world, and you kind of hope that that reaches people
Yeah.
who might
Hmm.
look at it and you know, get something from that. And so
Hmm.
yeah, it is difficult, and I
Yeah,
think over time, I think I'm probably better
yeah,
at at not, you know, avoiding too much of that, listening to other stuff that's going
yeah.
on, and you know, I think I always my opinion on it is that if you if your book has got far enough that somebody didn't like it,
Hmm.
then that's a mark of actual success. Because quite often with, you know, books that are, you know, in the kind of smaller areas, or it's a self-published book or something, you
Hmm.
don't get, it's really hard to get past that initial circle of people who might have some connection to you know.
Yeah, that's a really good way of thinking of it. No one's ever said this to me before. You're a genius. My husband's gonna love you later. I'm gonna tell him about this. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, because smaller authors, we start with the friends and the family, and then it
Yeah.
expands. Yeah, you're absolutely, wow, thank you for that. Eye-opening. You should do a post about that for people. Yeah, that's really a great way to look at it. But hopefully you really don't get too much of that negativity from this because this is really well told and really there's no reason. Um, but we have so many cute things to talk about with your book. I don't want to weigh it down. Craig, you want to go?
Yeah, for sure. So this is a bit of a two-parter. I'm going a little off script, Callie, if you're looking at our questions there.
I am.
So the initial question is, did you have a favorite character in your book? But I'm going
Mhm.
to adjust it to say, and do you have a favorite character to write? Because I find sometimes those are
Oh,
different,
yeah.
favorite characters and favorite to
Mhm.
write. And if they're different or the same, why? Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, good question. And that they are two different things. I guess they do
Mhm.
sometimes overlap, don't they? I think
Mhm.
I probably had the most fun writing um Emily and Percival, the
Yes.
two kind of star
So cute.
characters, because they're such like, I really wanted them to be kind of like a bit, you know, a bit funny but
Hmm.
warm, and just really kind of very earnest and a bit naive, but just really sort of like, you know, the kind of positive, like, yeah, let's just do this, you know, why not? And have that kind of in the book, because they were needed, you know, because there are some things in the book that are a bit more challenging, you know, that he does deal with, you know, it's not too much of a spoiler to say early on that he deals with the loss of a grandparent,
Mhm.
you know, and that's kind of part of the sort of triggering of this kind of experience that he goes through, and I really wanted there to be that sort of balance in the book, that it wasn't too heavy.
Mhm.
And so Emily and Percival were a great sort of way to try and achieve that, and I did really enjoy writing them.
Mhm.
um and but then I think maybe my favorite character in the book, maybe it might be the Great Bin Jah Meen, because
Hmm.
um, he was the one that really sort of allowed me to try and get into, like, you don't really get much from him for a lot of the book, and when you
Hmm.
do, that's
Hmm.
the point where I'm trying to sort of really get into, I guess, what I'm trying to say a little bit in the book.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mhm.
And so it was really challenging to kind of
Hmm.
write that in a way that was sounded like a character and didn't sound like a message,
Hmm.
and was part of a story and not a, a moral or something.
Yeah.
So I kind of really enjoyed that challenge of treading that line between, those two things.
Hmm.
But yeah, all of the SARS, I had great fun with them, and even now some of the things they say still make me chuckle a little bit, which
Yeah.
I think is a great measure, because
Yes.
I don't go around laughing at my own writing very often. So
I do. I do. But now that brings me to this. So when we first saw the submission, of course, we know that you are good friends with Benjamin Rush, who's also one of our writers for Deep Hearts Why, and your co-host on your podcast too. So when we saw the title, I saw Benjamin, and I was like, now that says Benjamin, and I was like, that means Benjamin. So now, but question, so I'm not saying is Benjamin based on Benjamin, but is that like, was that name like an homage to Benjamin, or did it just work out that way?
no, do you know what? I came up with that before I'd even met Benjamin. That was one of the
Really?
earliest bits. Yeah, and I think
Wow.
I was looking for a name. In all
Mm-hmm.
honesty, it was one of those really sort of
Mm-hmm.
um, mundane author tasks you have where you're like, I need to try and
Yes.
like figure something out here, and
Yes.
I needed to try and come up with a name that could be misrepresented or
Yes.
mispronounced in such a way that it might sound like something else believably for
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
so and actually it's interesting because of everyone once you read the story, I think especially as an adult, you start to pick up on maybe a little bit along the line. You're like, okay, I can kind of see what's going to happen here.
Yeah.
But I know some kids who kind of test read it for me, they didn't necessarily pick up on that until right
Mm-hmm.
towards the end. And what's
Mm-hmm.
funny is how many adults I've had read the title and go, "The Great Bin Jah Meen. What's a Bin Jah Meen?" And I'm like, oh, well, I
Have to
obviously
read the
just
book to
about,
find out.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I just about pulled off the fact that it does quite clearly sound like Benjamin. But you're right. I mean, I feel like it's great that it is Benjamin, and
Mm-hmm.
it fits well with
It
Ben. Yeah,
does.
Benjamin's he's such a, like, we met through writing, and
Mm-hmm.
he's such a great guy, and he's such a great writer as well.
Yeah.
His books are, I really admire his writing. So the fact that it is the same name, I think is great.
Yeah.
A
Well, we
lovely
owe Benjamin
coincidence.
for you too, right? Because you came to us
Mm.
because of Benjamin, right? So,
Yeah, it was
yeah.
his, just chatting with him, and I was thinking about where to try and find a good home for the book, and and
Hmm.
he said lots of nice things about you guys, and so I
Yeah.
thought, well, look, I'll give it a go. You never know
Uh-uh.
with
Yeah.
submissions about what's going to
Yeah.
work and what doesn't, and
Yeah.
luckily here
Yeah.
we are.
Yeah,
Mhm.
he's great. He's always upbeat and positive and just happy, and
Mhm.
he really is such a great writer. But yeah, so let me get back because you
On
did that
track.
one. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask the question that we both want. So this one, we need to know. There are so many recipes in this book, okay? So what we want to make one. So, but a lot of these are actual desserts because I know Craig looked them up while he was editing. So like if you had to recommend one of the desserts in the book, Craig says it should be a cake. So, but I love cake too. So, which cake should we make from the book if we make it?
See, now that is a very difficult question to answer. That may be the hardest question of the day. Yeah, there's so many different ones in there, and
Mhm.
at some point I was like, googling cake
Mhm.
names, because I was running out of names off the top of my head that I could make a pun with, because there's so many puns.
Mhm.
They
Yes.
only, for people listening, the SARS, that like cakes are the only food they eat, and they've never come across anything else. And
Mhm.
so a lot of their language revolves around kind of cake related
Mhm.
um, kind of things that they say. I mean,
Mhm.
I guess the quintessential like English experience is like an afternoon tea, which would
Okay.
be with homemade scones or scones. I don't know
Okay.
how you say it.
Uh-huh.
Um, and like clotted cream and jam, which is why I guess maybe they have such a kind of big part of the. It's odd to say that a scone has a big part of my story, but it plays. It's there for a reason, and there are
Hmm.
connections with his childhood growing up and his relationship with his grandma and the kind of why scones get picked. So there is
Hmm.
a sort of line there.
Hmm.
Um, so there's loads of great cakes, but I think if you really want a kind of indulgent like session, and they're not too difficult to make. I don't know if you've ever made scones before.
No, I haven't made
My
we
mom has
haven't
made
made a
them.
scone.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
never made them.
Yeah.
I know that it's hard to get clotted cream here. Like I wouldn't even know
Is it?
where to go to get it.
Oh,
Can
that's
we
a
make
shame.
it can we make it? Like, can you make clotted
Um,
cream?
No idea.
Probably, but I don't know what kind of
I don't know either.
Italian-based equipment you
I don't
need.
even know.
Oh, that's a
Can we
real
gotta
shame that you
pick
can't get clotted cream, but
then
you're
we gotta
missing
pick
out.
something else. Oh man.
Um,
Yeah.
well, they might have clotted cream. Like if I go to like a big grocery store, we have a chain called Superstore, which has a lot of international foods. So it's possible I'd find clotted cream there. I think I have seen it once, but like you had to really look for it.
Yeah. I
Mm.
mean, you could probably do a pretty decent stand-in with some good like whipped cream if you do
Hmm.
like whip it,
Okay, yeah.
whip yourself with some really nice double. It's called double cream here. Is that the same
Yeah.
for you guys? Yeah.
Like,
We call it
Um,
whipping cream. Yeah.
yeah.
okay. Yeah. So get it nice and thick. It won't.
Yeah.
It's not quite the same, but it will still be nice. You can't.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to then that is what we will do. We'll make scones in honor of Ezra and the Great Bin Jah Meen. And we'll have
Sure.
to post them with the book. Yeah. Okay. And then I know we have some more questions about the book. But yeah,
We
I had to
do.
ask the cake question because
Hmm.
we've been on a real cooking kick lately. So like it doesn't even seem like we're a writing podcast anymore because all we're doing is cooking all the time. But it's really fun and like we spend a lot of time writing. So when we're recording the podcast, if we don't have a guest, then we're like most of the weekends we're just making new recipes. So why not? So we just share them with
Yeah.
everybody, which is a
Nice.
ton of fun. Yeah. So your turn. Ask a question about the book.
Yeah. So I'm gonna ask a question, but then I'm gonna rephrase it in case you didn't prepare this in advance.
Oh.
But do you have a favorite line from your book? And if you don't have one prepared, do you have a favorite scene?
Mm.
Good question. Um, maybe I could have maybe I can kind of try slightly cheat with this answer and
Sure.
say
Yes.
That's
it
allowed.
would be
Yes.
like I kind of the phrases I enjoyed using the most were when the SARS had their variations of almost
Hmm.
that was in their own kind of language. So I really enjoyed like the nearly most and the
Hmm.
certainly most and the absolutely most. It was kind
Hmm.
of it was an idea that I kind of came up when I was thinking about how to sort of you do that thing that kids do. They just kind of they use language that seems to make perfect
Hmm.
sense to them, but when you're an adult, you kind of lose that sense of
Hmm.
Yes.
Hmm.
playing around with words, don't you? Like my daughter the other day had her first ever chicken nugget,
Hmm.
um, and I asked her like, "Oh, what did you think of it?" And she was like, "Oh, it was absolute delicious." Um,
Hmm.
and that's not a phrase that you would like. It's just
Yeah.
a tiny difference to a standard
Yeah.
phrase, but because of that tiny difference, it just sounds that much more like important,
Adorable.
doesn't it? Exactly, and adorable. So I kind of enjoyed finding opportunities for them to sort of have that in their language.
Hmm.
And yeah, most of the scenes I would say with them where, especially the first time Ezra goes and they meets these people and he's a kind of furless beanpole and they don't understand him, and yeah, all of those scenes I kind of really enjoyed. They felt quite. Those were the ones I was saying about you're in the flow. They felt quite sort
Yeah.
of just it was the writing themselves almost when they were
Hmm.
coming in.
I
Hmm.
love the flow so much, Robin. I felt the flow this morning in the car, and I told my husband, I literally said, I'm like, I'm so happy right now because I'm at the moment where everything is working. And I know that at some point today, I'm not going to be in the flow. So I
Yeah,
just want to remember this, like this good feeling, because
Hmm.
there's nothing better than when you
yeah,
can't wait to sit down to write because it's just pouring out of you and the story
yeah.
is just going. So yeah. Um, but yeah, I think the little mice are so cute. And I have to say, before I forget, Juliet Karen did the illustrations for this book, and she did such a great job. I love Parker's illustrations so much. Parker is just so cute too. I don't know, do you have a favorite thing that she drew out of the book? Or not really, all of
Oh,
it.
that's another tough question.
I
Yeah, I
know.
did want to make sure that Juliet
Yes.
got a shout out in the session because
There we go.
she did do such a great job. And I
Did.
should say as well, she's also an adopter.
Oh.
And so I kind of, she's another person I met through writing.
Hmm.
And I reached out to her about the story.
Hmm.
And yeah, she really kind of took to the story, and I asked her about about the illustrations, and she was just great about it. She was like, yeah, let's do it. I'd love to do it.
Hmm.
And we had a lot of kind of back and forth because she lives in the States, obviously, and I'm in the UK, so it was a lot of you know we had a lot of innovative ways of trying to like
Yeah.
share ideas and everything. But I'm really happy with I love the final product. Yeah, I think her drawings of Parker are brilliant. Like her
Hmm.
steam train is great.
Yeah. Yeah.
The final drawing of Ezra at the end, I think is just
Hmm.
really yeah. And I had
Yeah.
this idea of having a little needle and thread at the start of
Hmm.
each chapter as to kind
Hmm.
of stitching the patchwork of the story together.
Hmm.
As it kind of talks about as we're all kind of patchworks of stories, I think. And for Ezra, he was this is about him sort of trying to stitch his patchwork a little bit, make sense of what he's got and what's going on. And
Hmm.
I was like, I would love it if we could come up with something like that at the start. And she did this drawing. It was just, I was like, that's exactly. I wasn't sure what it would
Hmm.
look like, but that is exactly what it should look like. So
Hmm.
it was a
Yeah.
really nice relationship working with her, and she was really generous with her time, and she's done such a great job.
Yeah. And the illustrations are just, I love illustrations in books so much. Like even in adult books, I love illustrations so much. But yeah, she did a really great job. But I don't know, little Parker is just, it's so cute. He's just such a cute. And I'm terrible. I can't draw at all. Like I cannot. Like my kids ask me to draw stuff. Like they'll probably hear me outside the room, but like I had to draw Sailor Moon one time. You don't even want to know what poor Sailor Moon looked like. But to our kids, they think it's great at that age. She might see it when she's an adult. She might come across that and be like, what is this monstrosity? But she's still at the age that she's like, oh, this was really great. Like she really loves it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, please don't show that to anyone. So yeah, I have a lot of admiration for people with an artistic talent because I do not possess that skill at all. Um, yeah. Um, so we have a few more about your book and then we will wind down with you. But if we had to say just a few more things. So what is
Hmm.
one thing you want readers to know about your book? Or I would say adults probably more so like the adults, because really we talked about this prehand, and of course we want kids to read the book, but we want the adults to know what the book is about and why an adult should buy this book for their middle grade child.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important question, actually. And I think it comes back to that point about representation in books.
Hmm.
Actually being neurodiverse and or being adopted um, is way more common than people necessarily are aware of because
Hmm.
adoption is not something that people necessarily talk about that openly, especially young children when they're adopted themselves, and it's not something that just because people aren't talking about it doesn't mean that it's not there. That it's not a
Hmm.
thing. As we all know, neurodiversity is something that we're learning more and more about every day, and um, starting to understand a bit more about. But actually, the vast majority of neurodiverse people are probably still undiagnosed, for example.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So this kind of trying to build a better understanding of it with your communities in schools with your children, I think is really really important. And books are such a great way for kids to do that, because if you just talk to them about this and told them, oh, this is true and that's true, and there are kids like Ezra out there, it wouldn't have anything like the same kind of effect or impact, I don't think, as you can see happening through books. They're such a powerful tool, books, I think,
Hmm.
for kids especially. And that's why I wanted to write one at this kind of age, this 8 to 12 age, where they are growing up a bit and they are sort of developing a better sense of themselves and the world around them, and actually yeah, it's a really important time for them to sort of be aware of this kind of stuff. And
Mhm.
um, especially obviously if you do know or you have a child who is neurodiverse or
Mhm.
adopted.
Mhm.
But equally, if you don't, I think helping your child to appreciate that these kind of children exist and this is the kind
Yeah.
of experience that they have, and actually, being adopted isn't like it is portrayed in lots of books where it's just the happy ending at the end of the
Mhm.
story, or it's like some kind of sinister secret that no one knows about, or it's a
Mhm.
reason why a child is a chimney sweep orphan, or like as we were saying, like that's not actually what it's like
Mhm.
to be
Mhm.
Hmm.
in this situation. And I think that, I guess, is probably my biggest reason why, but also
Yeah.
because it's a great adventure. Like,
Yeah.
it's a fun story. It's essentially it's about family, and has lots of positive messages around that. So I think that's, if you wanted the short answer, that would be the short answer.
Yeah, no. Well, those are all great reasons. And yeah, Craig, you have one?
Yeah, I do. It's sort of a follow-up question. As I think we mentioned it on air, not just before hitting the record button. But we are slowly expanding into some more middle grade books. And I'm curious, as a middle grade author yourself and as a parent of a middle grade child, what sort of middle grade books do you think we need more of? Is there like a gap you see, or is there maybe not a gap, but we should definitely have more of this certain type, whether it's a representation, a subgenre? What do you think we need more of?
So you've got lots of good questions today. I mean, that's a really tough one to answer, I think, because I think you could make a good case for lots of different
Yes.
areas, couldn't you? I think, actually, and maybe there. I don't know. Do you get David Walliams books in the States or
I
Canada?
haven't
I
read one, so I
don't
don't.
recognize the name.
Mm-mm.
He's really big in England. His books are kind of
Mhm.
uh, they're like sort of a bit funny, a bit silly,
Mhm.
and they sell. Like, the reason why I mentioned this is because it's a massive seller in the UK, really,
Mhm.
one of the biggest children's charts books, and
Mhm.
they're all fine. But what I would say is that maybe we need a little bit less of that kind of book, which
Mhm.
does have a lot of stereotypes in it, I would say,
Mhm.
and sometimes doesn't really try and understand children for where they're at
Mhm.
and what they're doing.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and as much as I admire someone like Roald Dahl as a writer, he wasn't famous for his empathy for the child
Mhm.
characters in his books.
Yeah.
And actually, to the point where there was pretty cool things that happened to them, and they kind of deserved it in the story. And you think, actually, especially as a parent, you're like, wow, that's it's an interesting choice. And he's a
Yeah.
great writer in many ways, and there are lots of things about him that I totally don't agree with in other
Mhm.
aspects of his life, of course. But
Yeah.
yeah, maybe just stories that kind of explore, that empathy around children, and especially children who may have their own struggles going on,
Mhm.
that aren't the kind of standard prototype childhood hero in a story. And that's a huge, like, under that
Yeah.
banner, you would get loads of different things, wouldn't you? And I think
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
anything more like that is yeah, definitely
It's good.
definitely good from my perspective.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that really lines up with what I've been hearing because this whole idea of us, there are two things that led to us wanting to expand more into middle grade books. Number one was Ezra and the Great Bin Jah Meen. Fantastic start to our middle grade venture. And then I was at a school librarian convention trying to sell some books. And I had all of our like Deep Hearts YA books, which are aimed at teenagers, and almost every librarian there worked in a kindergarten to grade 4 school. And they're like, we love these books, but they're a little too old for our audience. And so I
Mhm.
got talking with some of them and I said, well, what are you looking for? Like, I'm the publisher. I can kind of guide what we do. And there's a few of them said that there's a real lack of middle grade books with authentic and compassionate representation. In the context, because we're there as a queer young adult publisher, they were specifically speaking of like queer children. And we need books where there are queer children just having adventures, not books about being queer, which is very similar to what we have here with Ezra and the Great Bin Jah Meen, because it's a book about, it features a child who is neurodiverse and adopted, but the book is not necessarily about that. He has an adventure, kind of ties into his identity in various ways, but the book is not about his identity itself. Yeah, so you have been answering that question throughout today's episode.
Yeah, and that makes total sense what they've said, and I
Mhm.
think that's one of those things. I think as an author, when you hit upon that realization, from certainly from my perspective, and some of the people that other authors I've spoken to as well, it's been a similar kind of feeling where you realize that, you know what, I've got a reason to write a book, which might be that I really want to write more books for this type of person or that type of
Yeah.
person. And then you realize, actually, no, the best way for me to do this is to just write a great story with somebody from that group as the hero, you know, and then how does their life play out in this adventure, and what are the kind of unique ways that that their adventure might be lived through their life rather than through someone else. And actually that can be, yeah, one of the best ways to really increase representations, because then kids can access that, and they can do it, you know, on their own as well. Like, it can give them time and space to really think about something with a book that they can do in their own mind. It's a very personal experience, isn't it? You don't have to sit down and watch it on a TV or go out and do something with it. You know, you can do it in your own space at your own time, and that's a great opportunity, I think, to do that and see yourself in those stories, and then think about, you know, you as an individual in the world, and what that means. And yeah, there's such a great way. I mean, obviously, we're all here, we all love books, so maybe we're a bit biased, but I do think they are a very unique way to think about these kind of things.
I agree. Yeah. And are you planning to write any more middle grade books? And like, do you see Ezra? You think you could do like a spin-off of Ezra, like more adventures of Ezra and the Saws and like all kinds of cool stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I have a follow up in mind,
Hmm. Hmm.
for Ezra, and I kind of did when I sort of got
Hmm.
through to the last chunks of the first one. I was like, oh yeah, I could do that.
Hmm.
Um, so it's definitely something that I'm thinking about and kind
Hmm.
of contemplating on.
Hmm.
Um, Strangely enough, I recently started a PhD.
Oh yeah,
So that's kind of
congratulations. That's
something that,
exciting. What a
yeah,
venture.
thanks.
Woo.
So I'm kind of, kind of, I've got that sort of taking up a lot of my sort of, I guess, mental space at the moment.
Hmm. Yeah.
But I think that's still relatively new. So I think once that maybe settles down a little bit, then maybe,
Yeah.
I find it, I can't, I'm not like that type of Stephen King type who's like, right, well, from 7 till 9 a.m., I'll
I
write for
can't do
two
that.
hours and then I'll stop and I'll have written this amount of words. And then within a month, I'll have finished a book. And then, you know, I can't work like that. Like, I have to, in a way, I'm kind of almost led by when some, I'll just realize almost by accident, I'm like, oh, I could, that's a good idea, I should write that down. And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden I'm doing it. And then I'm like, oh, I'm actually writing now.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah. And of course, there's loads of other things in life, like you said, that get in the way too. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm hoping to. I think it's a world that I would like to go back to. Yeah,
Oh,
put it
that's
that way.
exciting. Yeah, that's really exciting. And then I think we're almost done.
Mhm.
But what do you so do you and so you mentioned you have two kids? Did you say a son and a daughter? So what do you guys do for fun in the UK? What's fun over there that you guys get to do?
Well,
Like when you're not
UK,
writing, is there like lots of fun stuff that you guys get to do?
fun in the UK usually involves like getting rained on somewhere. Um, um, yeah, I guess I don't know, like, all sorts of different things, really.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't say there's any like necessarily any one thing. Like,
Yeah.
my son's into all the kind of like football was obviously a big thing here
Hmm.
and I know you guys call it soccer, but I'm going to stick with football. Um,
It
and
makes sense to
really,
call
I
it
mean,
football. Like I
kind of
love
does, right?
soccer.
You know,
Soccer is like my favorite sport, and I played soccer too. So I really love it. But even when I was little, I was like, why is this not called football? And then like because I grew up in a sports household, so I was always questioning it. And then when I learned that in the UK, that well, everywhere else they call it football, I'm like, why are we
literally
not calling
everywhere
it
else. Yeah.
football? So So yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
so
the whole
cool.
world.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the whole
as
world. Yes.
apart
Wow.
from where you guys are.
Or
Yeah,
from
so
here. Yes.
my son and I are Crystal Palace fans, which you probably never heard of, but they're in the top division. It's called the Premier League in the UK.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it's a team in Southeast London where I live, and we go and watch
Hmm.
them play. Um,
Fun.
we have season tickets, so we go and watch them. And
Aw, that's
yeah, and
really cool.
it's great. Like if you ever get the chance to go to and go and watch a football match because it's a great experience.
Oh yeah, I love
Um,
watching soccer. I'm
and
sorry, I can't call it football because I have to do soccer, but I love watching football soccer. Um, but yeah, that's really exciting. And did your son read the book? Has he read Ezra? And did
yeah,
he like it?
definitely.
Yeah.
He did,
Oh,
and
good.
it was really important to me that before I did anything with it, I wanted
Hmm.
him to read it because
Hmm.
I kind of wanted him to experience the book and see what he thought about it and how he felt about it.
Hmm.
Um, and
Hmm.
yeah, and he read the whole thing and was really positive about it and was telling everyone about it. So I was like, okay, that's
Oh,
that's a really good
what a
indicator.
cool moment for you that must have been. That's like the full circle. Like the kids got
Yeah,
the book in their hand. That must have
yeah,
been such a cool moment. Oh, that's really
yeah.
cool. Yeah, my kids can't read my books, Robin. So
I was going to say, I don't imagine that's happened just
no,
yet for
no,
you.
no, no.
Can
But
you
I do
envisage a
have
day
like
when it will, or not?
someday. The little one is like, because they can look at the art on the cover. So like, and like I have big posters of them in my room that are framed that my husband gets. Anytime I meet a milestone number of sales, he orders one for me. So I have them all framed in my room. But the little one, she even just said this morning, when I grow up, I'm gonna give all your books 5 stars, Mom. And I'm like, all right. But yeah, for you especially because like, my books will have nothing to do with them. There's not, there's no interweaving like
Yeah.
narrative or any like, but for you like to write this book really for him and to have him hold the book in his hand and really love it. Like that I could cry about that. Like that's just it's really cool. It's a really cool moment. I'm thrilled that we were able to be a part of it. So really thank you for choosing us as a publisher because it's quite an honor.
Well, thank you for picking me up as a publisher. I feel like it's a great, it's really great being part of a team of people who are really nice and really lovely to work with, but also think about the kind of books that they're putting out there and have a vision for what they want to do. And
Yeah.
it's a vision I support, and it's an inclusive vision, and it's something that I think is important. So it's great to be able to say, whenever anyone asks about the publisher, I'm like, well, they're not in the UK. They're actually quite a long way away.
Yeah.
But the first thing I'll say about you guys is that you've got a really inclusive outlook on what writing is for and what writing for young people is about, and that's something that is really important. And yeah, it's great to be able to be a part of that.
Thank
Cool.
you.
Yeah, cool.
Oh.
Okay, and then I think we're all done, but
Mhm.
we have two things. So two things. You can do the last thing that I know that you love when you get to
Okay.
spring it on
Yes.
people. But before that, where can people follow you online? So we know they can buy Ezra and the Great Bin Jah Meen basically anywhere online that books are sold. The link is on our website, www.dreamspherebooks.com, and it's also on Amazon and lots of other places. But where can they find you?
Um, so I've got a website which is rdstevensauthor.co.uk. Um, and I've also got my main kind of place where I kind of post any updates is Instagram, which is RD Stevens author as well. So avoid Robin Stevens, not intentionally. Robin Stevens is another author. She's brilliant and written loads of great books. But she's not me. So if you are looking for me, then try and avoid her. If you come across her, buy her books as well because they're also very good. But yeah, so they're the two main places. I used to use X, and I just
Oh,
not
Not
anymore.
worth it
So
anymore. No.
we're
yeah,
not using that anymore. We're
yeah,
there, but we're not using it really. Yeah.
yeah.
So okay, cool. So we have that,
Yeah.
and now you get to do your favorite thing, Craig.
Yeah. And actually, before I jump into that,
Oh,
since we're audio, not text, it's Stevens with a V, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah.
Okay. So the last question, which is not on the questions that we sent you, every time we have a guest, we spring this on them. We need a final thought for the day. So what is your final thought for this episode of the podcast?
Final thought for the day. Um, don't underestimate the power of stories.
Mm.
I like that.
I think this is my favorite one so far. Good job. You thought of that quick. We didn't even warn you about it either.
So
Greg
what came
always,
to mind? I don't know. We'll see.
yeah, that's good. And it's a good piece of advice. Yeah. So I think that wraps it up for us. I'm
Mhm.
super glad that you got to join us. We're thrilled to meet you. And yeah, everyone should go buy this book.
Thank you. It was great to chat with you both. Really lovely to spend some time.
Now it's time for coffee with Callie and Craig. That was
Mhm.
super fun.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. Robin is a nice guy.
Yeah, I knew he would be. You could just tell from his emails. Like he's
Yeah.
always so nice and polite. And then like plus with writing Ezra, it's just,
Hmm.
I don't know. It was such a great conversation. I almost didn't want to let him go. I want to just let him talk more about the book. But
Hmm.
yeah, it was a great interview. And I don't know. I'm so excited. And he told us some stuff after that we're excited about that we can't
Yeah.
share. But yeah,
Yeah.
exciting stuff all around. So definitely, if you haven't already bought Ezra and the Great Bin Jah Meen by R.D. Stevens, you definitely should go grab a copy. And if you have any young kids in the family or relatives or anyone you work with that has a child of that age, maybe consider grabbing a copy for them.
Hmm.
Because yeah, it is a really great book. But yeah, I had fun talking about that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and next
And
episode.
yeah, we're getting back into the cooking, aren't we?
We are. Yeah, but this is going to be fun. We should make this scones, but that won't be the
Yes.
next episode.
Or scones, as he calls them.
He did. He said scones are scones. So which way is the right way to say it? Is it scones
Probably,
where he lives?
probably.
I should have
But
asked. Yeah.
here, I hear both here, but I
Oh,
usually
okay.
hear scones more than scones.
Okay. Well, I will say scones because I don't know. But yeah, we'll have to see what we can do about the clotted cream, which I gotta be honest with you, I don't like the way that word
It
sounds. It
doesn't
makes me kind of
sound that
icky.
great.
I
Yes.
don't know why. I don't know what's wrong with me. It just makes me like, I don't know. But we'll look it up and see what we can do because I definitely
Hmm.
want to make it and then do a little post. That'll be fun. But next weekend,
Hmm.
what we are making because Valentine's Day is in 6 days.
Yes, yes, we are being nice to our husbands for once, and we
Hmm.
are making some Valentine's chocolate.
Yes,
That episode, though we're recording it on Valentine's weekend, won't come out till I think March, so
it's true.
it'll be
It's true.
interesting, but you'll
Yeah.
get to come along on the adventure regardless.
Yeah, well, we were looking for anime recipes because, I love
Ah,
anime so much.
yes.
So you said, well, let's see if we can find an anime recipe. And then I remembered that in most like anime series, there's always a part where they give away like the Valentine's Day chocolates but they're always making them like homemade. Like normally I just buy the stuff from the store. So thought it would be fun this time if we make our own. So I can't remember. I know we're making truffles. We're making a couple
Mhm.
different kind of truffles. Did we say chocolate covered strawberries too? I feel like your husband said he wanted
Ooh,
those.
yes, he
I think
did.
when we asked
So
him, John said he wanted chocolate
we
covered
might be
strawberries.
stuck with making those.
That's okay. So I think we're making truffles and chocolate covered strawberries, and then we'll put them in a cute little gift boxes
Hmm.
for our husbands if we don't eat them all while we're making them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
We'll
that is a bit of a risk, but
We'll see how it goes. Yeah. All right. So anyway, that was fun. Now you can tell people where to follow us.
yeah, so you can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and if you're still using X, we're on there. We're
Mm-hmm.
slowly moving off.
Mm-hmm.
We're at Cali Craig Talk, CaliCraigTalk.
Yeah, that's it. So thanks
Hmm.
everyone for hanging out with us.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye bye bye. I'm not actually gonna sing.
You don't even have to. You just did the bye. It was enough. And you did the wave. All right. Bye.
Okay, bye bye.